Well, here we are with my new and improved camera technique, in which I've reversed. I'm using the selfie lens so that I can actually view the screen as I film, and also, more importantly, I can get the camera in position to my liking and then just hit the start button with my finger, rather than have you experience that roller coaster motion sickness effect of me putting it in place. So here we are. We have two kilts, both made clearly by the same kilt maker, and we're going to alter both of them to fit the client, and it's a relatively tight deadline, so I'm not going to spend too much time messing about. Now, I had taken his measurements before, but he came by for a visit. He lives up the coast. He came by for a visit, and I actually fitted the kilts to him, because the numbers alone aren't enough, particularly when we're dealing with somebody whose figure has coarsened, shall we say, over the years. He's not obese by any means, but his figure has changed. And also, as a result of age, his right hip is vastly higher. Wrong. His right hip is quite a bit lower. His left hip is higher, like noticeably so. So we're going to correct for that as well. So, and also, I've let a recent, well, it's not a recent lesson learned. I've known about this for a while, is that when we're altering for a figure which is increased, we have to treat our length measurements with caution, because you can measure, in my typical fashion, measure from the natural waist at the side of the body down to the knee. But from the side of the body down to the knee is relatively a straight line, versus the front of the figure, the cloth is going to take more of the scenic route, if you will. So it's easy to measure a kilt, think you've done it right, and then make a kilt that's incredibly too short. So I had tried the kilt onto him. He was content with the very great length. It comes well up his abdomen, but that's what he wants, so that's what we're going to go with. So looking at the kilt from the outside, we have 29 pleats, pleated to the black line, as we see. This is the Davidson weathered tartan. Now, the first thing I see are these threads sticking out at the bottom of the fell. On closer look, I can see that these are, in fact, this seam seems to be machine sewn, but the rest of these are hand sewn. And these telltales, these clues, that's the original meaning of the word, is a piece of thread sticking out. And to follow a clue, you see where the thread goes, and thence from there it became the modern usage of a factor in solving a problem, or more typically a crime. So that's a clue, spelled C-L-E-W in the old days. So these threads picking out tell me that, see, right now the bottom of the fell is at the top edge, top of the kilt, bottom of the kilt. The fell is uniformly at the top edge of this gray line, but there's enough of these things sticking out. I don't think the fell is unraveled a quarter inch. I think that this bottom stitch was backstitched several times, and this is the back stitch has come loose, and that's what we're seeing there now. And to repair that, frankly, I'm going to have to re-sew at least half of the seam. Ideally, frankly, I should re-sew the entire seam, because if you only sew up to a certain spot, unless you've tied off the old seam, if you haven't tied off the old seam, eventually it's going to start unraveling beyond the part where you've already sewn. So the proper procedure here is I'm going to have to, I'll be snipping off these knots, but then I'm going to be re-sewing each of these 29 seams. The next thing I see is this rather curious belt loop arrangement. Particularly, usually the top is buried under the top band, but these are set down a little bit. And this one's curious. This one has a double loop, and I don't understand that at all. He wants me to keep them because he uses these loops for his waist belt. And I did tell him, and he did know, that properly, these loops are for the sporran strap. And usually they're a little closer to the center so that you get the fall of the strap to follow, to have the most flattering curve. But he wants them for his waist belt. I did tell him that, you know, if you need a waist belt to hold your kilt in position, your kilt simply doesn't fit and it needs to be altered. But he's adamant. This is what he wants, so this is what he shall have. And he doesn't wear his belt at the top. Many of us wear, when we do wear the characteristic, the stereotypical, very wide and somewhat cliched wide belt, many of us tend to dress it off the upper edge of the belt and dress it off the top edge of the kilt, but he wears it down a little ways. So I'm not going to be able to fit these until he comes in for his final fitting, because he's going to put the kilt on, he's going to put the belt on, and from there I'm going to see where I'm going to sew these loops on. But we're getting rid of this double thing because I have no idea what that's about. We're going to lose the bottom buckle on this side, bottom strap and buckle, because I've yet to be convinced that it does anything, really. And also because his left hip is considerably hit, his pelvis is quite off, you know, but just the vagaries of age. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the strap and buckle at this side of the right height at the same height, but this strap and buckle on the right hip, we're going to drop it down close to a couple of inches. In fact, I'm going to drop it down to that red line, which is measured center to center. Oh, look at that, exactly 2 inches. And my thought process for doing that, I'm just pulling a number out of my head. By dropping that buckle, we raise the kilt on this side. Now, that will mean that as he's wearing the kilt, the horizontal lines will in fact be horizontal. The bottom of the kilt, it's not a hem, the bottom of the kilt will be horizontal as it's seen as he's wearing it. The top edge, however, is going to be seen to be rising quite a bit to his right hip. We can't really do anything about that. The thought of tailoring a kilt so that the top edge assumed that sort of straight line would be hideously difficult, and frankly, I wouldn't expect to get it right the first or second or third time. But this isn't going to matter because he doesn't walk around in shirt sleeves. When he's wearing his kilt, he's also wearing his kilt coat, and that top edge, well, it's immaterial. Also, it just occurred to me when we do that, when we affix his belt and put the belt loops on, the belt is going to be at an angle relative to the top of the kilt anyway. And I think the very wide, distinctive belt might well distract from the fact that this is going up at an angle. But again, when you're wearing a kilt coat, you're only seeing about, let's say, 6 to 8 inches of the front of the kilt. What am I? 8.5 inches. Right? So yeah, buckle seams are resewn. Belt loops are taken off and then positioned again during the final fitting. Right hip buckle dropped 2 inches. Now, the other thing we're going to do is this. I used to do this way. You see the straps are fastened to the back of the outer apron. And we can take a look at that here. Incidentally, this lining looks like it's been replaced once because the rest of the lining is beautifully sewn. I mean, like, I take a look at it and think, you know, gee, I wish I want to sew that well. But this one looks like it's been re-sewn a couple of times. That's okay. That's what, oh, yeah, it's been repaired by someone with a differing skill level. Yes, we can see there. The straps are sewn on the inside. Now, I used to do it this way until a client showed me a better way, which is the way I do it now. Because when the straps are sewn on the inside of the kilt, when you put the kilt on, this is kind of difficult to show right here, but the strap will follow the arc of the body, but there's nothing to hold the edge of the kilt to follow that same arc. So your straps will be going around the corner like that, and the kilt apron edge sticks out. So what we're going to do is my habitual way of sewing the strap so that it's inside, it's sewn to the canvas and to the fold over, and then it comes out between the fringe, and that means everything, it's a much cleaner appearance. It looks much better. Okay. We only have to let out 4 inches, which is therefore 2 inches on either side. Now on the inner apron, I don't have much of an apron pleat there. I can feel it with my fingers, and it's what's that, 2.5 inches? Oh, look at that, exactly. This is why I continue to use the Imperial system, because it's pretty much biometrics. My thumb is an inch, 3 fingers are 2.5, basement, that's 4 inches, and so on. We have possibly enough cloth on the fold over on the inner apron. That looks like my stitching. I wonder if I altered this form one time in the past. I probably did. I could go through my records. Now we have one machine sewn seam here, which I find to be a bit of an embuggerance, but no matter. In the outer apron, there's a good amount of cloth here. I can easily get my 2 inches out of that, but there's hardly any inner apron or apron pleat here. So when we turn it over on the inside, I'll talk about the canvassing in a minute. When we look at the inside, yeah, see that inner apron pleat, or so the outer apron pleat is hardly deeper than the rest of the pleats. So if I was to rob 2 inches out of this inside pleat to widen the apron, this apron pleat is going to likely it's going to vanish under that one. And on this side, this is neat. They've done a bellows pleat here. I think that's actually a nice idea. I don't do it myself, or at least I haven't been doing it, but this is starting to influence me that maybe I should take a look at incorporating this in my future kilt making. So what's starting to look like to me, in order to get those 4 inches, I may well have to rob a pleat on either side, because if I rob a pleat, I'm losing at the waist, I'm losing 5/8 of an inch, but I'm gaining, well, in this case, I'm gaining the better part of a foot. Yeah, so rob one pleat on either side. Now on the inside, as I said, the lining is beautifully sewn, and it's a nice cotton. It's what I would expect to see on a sleeve lining in a very well made coat. It's light cotton, and the nice thing about the cotton is it breathes better. Same way that the same reason I use flannel. The cotton breathes better, so you don't feel quite so hot across the back, although we see a good amount of sweat staining here. But also the texture of the cloth means that the shirt tends to stay tucked in. If we were using a satin or a silk lining, the shirt tends to take itself out. Now, as I said, these seams are beautifully sewn. And then we see the canvas, and once again, I am disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed. For a number of reasons. One, they're using tailor's canvas, which is woven, its entire point is to offer shape and support, typically to the front panel and shoulder of a coat. It's which is what it's made for. The purpose of a canvas and the kilt is to provide lateral strength to take the tension of doing the kilt up. And once again, I've explained this many times before, and by having that broad panel of 5-inch canvas, which I use, it means that these seams don't come under tension, because these fell seams are not strong in tension. They will pull apart. But in this case, they've used, again, Taylor's canvas, which, I mean, if that's all I had in the shop, that would be fine. But it's really a waste of good material because this stuff's more expensive than the canvas I use. And it's not easy, and it's increasingly difficult to find, particularly for home kilt makers. I wouldn't use the word amateur. Second thing I don't like is that the canvas is in sections. The apron, you can see the outer apron is a separate piece, which is inevitable when you got the buttonhole, or mostly inevitable. But the inner apron piece is not even, they haven't even made an attempt. There's a gap of about ½ an inch between the two, and that's just not good practice because, again, we want a single piece of canvas between the buckle and the strap to act as a belt. So okay, that's strike 2. Strike 3 is that they've cut the canvases in pieces, and they've done this. I'm always a little bit careful when I'm using a picker, particularly when the camera is running, because when the camera is running, I feel the inclination to rush, and I don't want to do that because, yeah, see, this is in 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, and they've done that so that they could piece together the panels to get the radius, and that's worse than useless. This is cargo kilt making. It's the use of Taylor canvas, again, is to provide shape. You don't need shape and support on a garment which is under tension. The tension around the body maintains its shape. By segmenting it like this, we're removing pretty much all trace of mechanical integrity, structural integrity between between belt and buckle. So it's really not accomplishing anything. Third, they've put these herringbone stitches in the wrong direction, because a herringbone stitch has a little bit of give along this length, but it has practically no give along this length, and this is not what we want. So we're not going to see that again. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to take the top band off. I'm going to bin this. One of these days, I feel a bit cheeky. I'm going to start saving the Taylor's canvas that I pull out of these kilts and put it to one side, and then maybe make a coat using the Taylor's canvas that I've recycled for its actual intended function as a private joke, because when I'm wearing it, of course, nobody will know what's inside, but just as a bit of a sneer, if you will, against bad practice. Okay, yeah, top band off, canvas and lining removed. Good on them for using natural thread. That's cotton, or possibly silk thread. No, it's cotton, because silk wouldn't have torn that easy. Because and again, this is a very strong mark in their favor, because the stitching didn't prove stronger than the cloth. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's my alteration. It looks like my stitch. Okay. The other thing, oh, okay, there's a machine sewn seam where they've sewn the top edge of the canvas to the kilt. And I get it, you know, and for all of my posturing, maybe there's enough give in that seam. I think perhaps there is enough give in that seam. So if somebody, I guess I'm going to stop whining when I see someone using a machine sewn seam along the top of the kilt. I mean, I'll whine a little bit because it's a bear to take apart without wrecking the cloth, or at least it is for me. Okay, top band off, canvas off. Unpick the aprons, unpick the first and last pleat, press them flat, and then make the kilt up again so that the aprons are 4 inches wider at waist and hip. In goes new canvas, lower the buckle. Now he's some distance up the coast, In fact, he lives right about at the epicenter of that earthquake we had yesterday. I won't call it the big earthquake. It was 5.1 on the Richter scale. I mean, this place shook and sounded like a wooden sailing ship as it creaked and visibly shook. He must have been sitting right on top of it when it happened, so I guess I'll hear that story when he comes over. But he can't come by for a forward fitting, so I'm going to have to get this nearly complete, leaving only the placement of the right hip, the inner apron strap to fit it to him, and the placement of the waist belt straps, and then after that I can just button up the lining. Okay, so that's that kilt. I'm just going to take a second and roll it up. It's beautiful cloth. I immediately think it's cloth from the Dalgleish mill, but again, when this kilt was made, there were still other mills making this good quality cloth. And now Dalgleish is the only one who makes cloth which I consider to be good enough for a kilt. Now this, again, we can immediately see it's made by the same kilt maker, because we have that odd double loop on the right hip. I've already taken the one buckle off. Now, the middle of the front apron is centered. The front apron is centered on the red stripe. The pleats are centered on the red on blue. So we got red on black, red on blue. Now, ideally, they would both be the same. They would be a mirror image. Red and black, red and black. But I know sometimes when you're pleating to the set, that's not always possible. And this is a very large set. This is okay, it's 8 3/4. It's on the large side. It's not very large, but it's on the large side. So you are confined to the pattern on the cloth, because when they weave this and they cut it off the bolt, or if they take it off the mill and take it off the loom, nobody really pays attention, because why would they, about where the beginning of the cloth starts. So where the end of the bolt is relative to what the element of the tartan you're going to center the apron on, really influences the construction of the rest of the kilt, because we're starting at this edge. We're measuring 8 feet from here, 8 yards, I beg your pardon, from here. We lay out the aprons on either end, and then the quantity of cloth in the middle, we count the number of repeats, and we go through that exercise, and we calculate our pleat widths using the pleat table that I really hope you've taken the time to work out yourself rather than just use my cheat sheet, because the whole point of that is for you to understand the underlying principles. Okay. Yeah, but so sometimes you really can't help. Sometimes you're forced to pick let's call it the alternate, because when we look at this chart and we see there's the major elements, the most bold element of the tartan. I would call that second place. So the front of the front apron, the middle of the front apron is centered on red and black, just because of the arrangement of the tartan between the two pieces. Sometimes you have to just sort of go with it, just relax a little bit and do that. But the next thing I see is, there's my front and back, sorry, there's my left and right, my first and last pleat. The first thing I notice is, and this is something that I now do first thing. Okay, let's look at the first pleat. It is the black line on green. The last pleat isn't. There's black line on green 2 pleats over, the third pleat in. Now, I keep seeing this in kilts, and it's a possible reason has been explained to me. I don't think it's a good reason. By putting, for accommodating for future growth, putting a couple of extra pleats on the end. I think that's a bad excuse. I think that's somebody initially made a mistake and then came up for a reason why they did that. It's a marketing attempt at a solution to a quality control problem, because the problem with asymmetric pleats, of having two more pleats on this side than on this side, is that when you put a kilt on, if anybody puts a kilt on, quite quickly you learn to feel, as you're adjusting it to center it, you're feeling for that last seam on either side. So you got your kilt on, you bring your hands around and you feel that, and you're going to adjust those seams so that they're equidistant from the small of your back. Well, with two extra pleats on one side, what do you think that does to the center element? It pushes it to one side, because you've lined everything up. Let's say this is the center of your back. Now, the design is off center, and even someone who knows nothing about kilts is going to spot that. It's not a good idea. So right from the get-go, we're robbing those two pleats. We also have the same thing here. We have not quite as much cloth here. This one looks a bit beat up. I wonder what happened here. We don't have a very deep fold here. We definitely don't have 2 inches there. So I'm definitely going to have to rob at least one pleat on this side. I'm robbing so that means I'm robbing 3 pleats on this side, because we need to restore it to symmetry. We have to make it symmetric. Those 3 pleats are definitely going to give me enough cloth. See, again, this is very shallow too. You'd almost think this was an army kilt maker, or a kilt maker working in an army contract where they're trying to squeeze, every efficiency possible to get the maximum number of kilts out of a bolt of cloth. So this is inadequate for, I mean, you can see it's quite a dramatic A-line. We can decrease the A-line, make it less. We can rob out this curve, and we might get a couple of inches there, but we're definitely, see, that's interesting too. See, you've got a dramatic A-line on this side, but this actually goes in the opposite direction, because look at that distance. We are at the bottom of the pleat. We are a 1/4 inch, a nudge over a 1/4 inch, and at the top we're 5/8. That shouldn't bug me, but it bugs me. Okay, so we're going to rob 3 pleats on this side, which will give us the material to have a proper deep apron pleat and expand the 4 inches needed. We're going to rob, I start off by robbing 1 pleat here, but I might have to rob a 2nd pleat. Now this, right now, is, okay, this kilt is 40. We have to increase it to 44. This apron, okay, we got 21.5 and 19. So the pleated portion at the waist and hip are wider than the apron at waist and hip. So right there, our front apron is too small. And again, if the apron is even, frankly, if the apron gets to the horns of the pelvis, we've left Kilt Town and we've entered Tartan Skirtville. So I might well wind up robbing, what did I say his waist was? If his waist is going to 44, I want to turn this. I can't pull numbers out of my head, and it's always embarrassing for me to try to do mental arithmetic while the camera is running, because I grew up believing I was numerically illiterate. No, I'm not, but I still freeze and make mistakes when somebody's paying attention to me, when I'm faffing about with numbers. Okay, so yeah, top band off. I'm robbing 3 pleats from this side, 1 pleat from this side, and then I'm going to measure the cloth to see if I'm going to have to remove another pleat, because we want the front apron, particularly on the mature figure, we want the front apron to be at least half the waist and seat measurements. So this front apron currently is 18. We need to knock it out to at least 22. So we can rob, because the easy way is to rob pleats back until we restore the balance. If that won't work, then I'm going to have to tear the kilt down, press it flat, recalculate pleat widths, and sew these up more narrow, so that, well, I'm still going to have to rob pleats, so that because we need that deep apron pleat, we need that extra cloth there. We need to, change the proportion so pleated section is less than or equal to apron section. Right, okay. And on the inside, we have this absolute stramash, again, of the wasted tailor's canvas. This might be hair canvas. You know, it's expensive stuff. The wasted hair canvas, which has been cut into, in this case, 1, 2, 3 segments. The herringbone stitching, which again is going in the wrong direction. The absolute gap between, there's no mechanical integrity there at all. I like this. This is something I do. This top apron has been sewn, because this was obviously from a single width piece. The top apron, the top band has been sewn. Now, presumably, almost certainly, the raw edge is caught under that fell seam. And what we have here is, there's the selvage edge from the upper edge of the cloth. I like that. And we've got a little bit extra cloth there. And we've got, a little bit extra cloth there. It's possible that when we recycle this top band, that extra cloth will mean there's enough material there to have a top band of the correct length. Whether or not the top band will be able, because we really want to line, we really want this to match. If we're lucky, it will match. And frankly, that visual effect is more important than trying to save a bit of cloth. You know, if we must line that up so it matches, even if it means there's the top band runs out about here, and we have to use another piece of plain colored cloth to cover that, because this, when worn, this won't be visible. Looking inside the kilt again, there's a bit of a mystery as to how they've sewn the pleats. Now this is good, actually. This is good in that somebody recently asked the question, how do we steek when we have this effect? So this is going to give me an opportunity to show you how we correctly steek cloth. Oh Lord, look at this. The inner apron, the apron pleat is actually under that third pleat, because there's second pleat, because there's the one, two, there's the first pleat, this is the second pleat there. It's actually covering them. Two pleats buried there. And I don't know whether I want to, I can't decide whether I want to sort of understand how they did this, because I have this atavistic belief that bad practices and in some cases actual stupidity are contagious, right? Okay, well, I'm gonna have a chance to show you how we steek, because it's been cut out. There's no way we can press this flat and correct this stramash. I mean, it looks all right from the outside, so we're going to have to say that's good enough. And again, once again, because of the very asymmetric hip, we're taking off the bottom strap and buckle, and we're not binning it. I'm going to hand it to him, because I generally don't try to change people's minds, because the customer is always right in manner of taste. But I did convince him to, I did get him to agree that we're going to leave that lower strap and buckle off. I'm going to give them to him. And then if at some time in the future, having worn the kilt for a while, he really feels that he wants that thing back, whether it's a rational decision or just preference, then I'll put it on. But in any case, this buckle is going to be dropped, again, 2 inches to correct for his wonky hip. Okay, so there we are. I'm going to get to it. Oh yeah, same thing here with the straps mounted behind the apron. We're going to fix that as well. Okay, I will check in when I have. Well, I'll check in when I've got the next item on the checklist, which I guess will be after the top band, the buckles, the lining are off, the aprons are unpicked, and we've robbed those pleats. The next episode will be me explaining my decisions as to where we proceed from that point. So there we go. And I'm just going to turn the camera off now and wish you a good weekend.